I let a developer build 512 luxury homes on my family's 500-acre timberland and just watched. For 12 solid months, I never said a word. Not when the HOA president called me a lunatic on community forums or when hired goons shoved threats into my face in a forgotten roadside motel. For an entire year, I simply observed the methodical, arrogant destruction of everything my father had built and everything I was meant to protect. That silence was my weapon, but it was also a heavy, crushing burden. But today, I'm walking into the Crescent Falls courthouse with the one thing they never thought I had, the untouchable truth, the original deed. Most people know the rumors. They've seen the social media outrage, the headlines screaming about the Ridge Ripper, but they still don't know how a quiet, middle-aged structural engineer like me, who preferred blueprints to battlefields, ended up dragging a multi-million-dollar developer, a network of complicit city officials, and a corrupt HOA board into the biggest, dirtiest land fraud scandal this state has ever seen. My name is Julian Vance, Jules to my friends, and at 55 years old, I'm old enough to know the system is perpetually rigged against the little guy, but still young enough to hold a grudge that burns slow and clean when it's justly earned. That morning, parking my beat-up Ford F-150 in front of the massive stone courthouse, I could feel the sharp, high desert wind cutting right through the wool of that old Navy suit, the same one I wore to my daughter's college graduation 7 years ago. It didn't just feel tight across my shoulders. It felt weighted, the way carrying a long, heavy fight changes a man's entire posture and soul. Inside my old leather briefcase, the one that smelled faintly of drafting paper and pipe smoke, was just a single, yellowed, tobacco-scented document. The deed my dad signed back in 1971, wrapped carefully in acid-free tissue, treated like the relic it had become. Every time my fingers brushed that aged, slightly brittle paper, I could practically hear his voice again, that low, comforting Oregon drawl, full of the wisdom of quiet labor. If someone ever comes for what's ours, Jules, he'd say, looking out over the silent, endless timber, don't let the bastards take it. For most of my life, I thought he was talking about something abstract, about integrity or character. But now, standing there on the cold pavement, I knew he was talking about literal dirt, literal money, and literal greed. He had seen the world clearer than I ever had. As I approached the granite steps, the media scrum lunged forward, reporters shouting questions about evicting 500 families, their camera lenses flashing like a seizure of frantic strobes. I kept my gaze forward, focusing on the oak doors. I didn't engage. I've learned that you don't argue with a crowd that only wants outrage and has already chosen its villain. Everything that truly mattered would be revealed inside those imposing doors. Stepping into courtroom 6B, the enormous wooden doors closing with a heavy, final thud behind me, the world suddenly fell silent. It was that profound, heavy, strange quiet right before a massive, destructive storm finally breaks. If you'd told me a year ago I'd be standing here, the epicenter of a legal earthquake, fighting Benjamin Sterling and his whole real estate empire, I'd have laughed so hard I'd have strained something vital. But justice, I was learning, doesn't rush. Like a slow-moving glacier, it eventually carves a valley where a mountain once stood. I took a final, deep, centering breath, adjusted the collar that felt like a noose, and stepped inside, ready to methodically tell the judge exactly how 512 luxury homes, 512 lives built on a monumental lie, ended up on land that never, not for a single second of the past 50 years, stopped belonging to me. Before the court battle, before the chaos, before the media frenzy, you need to know the true nature of the land itself. My father, Walter Vance, a man of simple, unshakable principles, bought those 500 acres of Oakhaven Ridge back in '71. He paid cash, every dollar earned through the backbreaking, honest sweat equity of running his old riverside mill. It wasn't flat, easy land. It was prime, wild country. Thick timber, harsh scrub, deep ridges, and steep ravines, the kind of place where you felt the sheer scale of the world and your own smallness within it. He told me once he bought it because it was the only place he ever felt the profound, restorative sense of quiet again after returning from Vietnam, a silence that demanded nothing and promised stability. We spent all our summers there in an old, beaten-up Airstream, me running around barefoot tracking deer, him sharpening tools on a wet stone, humming some ancient, off-key tune. He'd often tell me, his eyes distant, "Trees don't lie, Jules. Men do. Pick which one you want as company for the long haul, son." And because he trusted no man, he kept every single scrap of paper, receipts, survey maps, old county letters, tucked inside heavy, leather-bound ledgers that smelled perpetually like pipe tobacco and old rain. Those meticulously organized ledgers, every expense logged in his precise hand, would end up saving my entire case. When he passed in 2018, he left the land to me, along with that terse, handwritten note. "Don't let the bastards take what's yours." 4 years after he died, life pulled me away in 1,000 tiny, exhausting directions, a painful, drawn-out divorce, 2 kids hitting adulthood and needing support, debilitating 14-hour shifts at the engineering firm just to keep pace. I stayed away because the memories hurt too much to walk through alone. I couldn't bear to see the Airstream spot empty. I let the land be quiet, just as he intended. But I paid the property taxes religiously every April, $8,000 a year, wiring the funds from job sites, parking lots, even during conference calls. Never missing a payment, never late. It wasn't until my daughter, Megan, asked last August where I planned to finally scatter his ashes that I drove up the winding mountain road. The first thing that hit me wasn't the familiar scent of pine, but the sight of new, impossibly smooth pavement, survey markers glinting aggressively, and a monstrous stone monument, polished granite towering like a headstone, etched with Havenwood Heights, a sterling luxury community, EST 2023. My land now had a corporate name, a fake, arrogant identity. I stared at the sign, feeling the cold weight of failure, and whispered, "Dad, they took it anyway." Driving past that monument, the ridge suddenly opened up, and the sight swallowed the breath right out of me. Hundreds of identical houses, street grids, cul-de-sacs, tiled rooftops, and a glittering clubhouse sprawled across my 500 acres like a huge, arrogant harvest stolen without permission, without conscience. It was a view no rightful landowner, certainly not one who cherished its quiet history, should ever be seeing for the very first time. I drove down to the main gate, a stucco fortress with Spanish tile replacing the simple dirt road where my father taught me how to shift gears. A young guard stopped me, nervous in his tactical vest, but behind him stood Celeste Sterling, the HOA president, hair a perfect salon blonde, measuring me with cold, efficient suspicion. "Sir, this gate is for residents only," the guard insisted, his voice cracking slightly. I tapped the leather folder on my dash, looked past him at Celeste, and said, my voice low and steady, "Son, I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." She stepped forward, asking for an address. I pointed, slowly, deliberately, at the hundreds of homes and said the line that haunted them for months. All of them. Celeste's smooth voice instantly turned condescending, thick with practiced corporate pity, offering relocation assistance for my legacy confusion. "A few thousand usually solves the issue, mister." The audacity, the utter certainty of her superiority, chilled me to the bone. I stepped out of the truck, my boots deliberately crushing the asphalt they had illegally poured. I looked her dead in the eye and slid the yellow deed across the hood of my truck toward her. "My name is Julian Vance," I said quietly, letting the name hang in the air. "I don't have legacy confusion. I have the title." Recognition, sharp and cold, flashed across her face. She definitely knew my name from some urgent, anxious board meeting and realized her cheap pity was misplaced. "I'm not walking in to claim anything." I cut her off, my voice gaining strength. "I'm here to tell you what already is." Her last confident shrug to the guard was chilling. "Just some old man. He won't get far." She had no idea she had just sealed her own fate and the fate of her entire empire with that single, arrogant dismissal. I didn't go home. My gut warned against it. I needed to disappear into the anonymity of the city's outskirts. I checked into a forgotten roadside motel. Around 8:30, Deputy Rollins called, weary but professional. The HOA filed a harassment report claiming my presence caused anxiety among residents. "Deputy, I had the deed. I was just standing on my own land." He sighed. "Mr. Vance, this is a civil matter. Get a real lawyer, Amelia Thorne." At 11:45 p.m., the sharpest knock came, demanding attention. I opened the door 2 inches, chain locked, to a calm man in a dark jacket, boots too clean. "My employer knows you, Mr. Vance," he said, his smile never reaching his eyes. He delivered a formal no trespass notice. "Mr. Sterling prefers his problems quiet. He's hoping you understand that." This wasn't a warning from a volunteer. This was professional, organized intimidation. Realizing I was fighting a machine, highly funded, utterly ruthless, and tied deep into the city's power structure, I called Amelia. She listened without interruption to the whole insane story, the gate, the threats, the deed. "Mr. Vance," she concluded, her tone instantly surgical, "you need to come to my office. This isn't a dispute. This is fraud, possibly federal." I met Amelia in her downtown office, which looked less like a law firm and more like a seasoned general's bunker. Maps, zoning charts, whiteboards covered in strategy. She confirmed the fraud. County records showed my father's parcel flagged, and a forged quitclaim deed under my name. A sloppy, amateur rush job was rejected. Critically, not one construction permit was linked to my land. "Every single structure is sitting on land with no valid title," she stated, stabbing the screen with her finger. I suggested freezing the development immediately. "No," she countered, her voice hardening like cold steel. "Stopping them now is exactly what they want. They'll claim ignorance, blame a rogue clerk, file bankruptcy, and walk away clean with tens of millions. We let them finish the crime. We let them tie up every loose end. When the last house sells, when the last mortgage is secured, the fraud becomes systemic and undeniable. And systemic fraud," she leaned in, her eyes intense, "opens the door to RICO, the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act." I asked if that meant racketeering and conspiracy, which sounded like something out of a movie. "Yes," she confirmed. "They'll owe treble damages, 3 times the profit. Conservatively, $60 to $80 million. I realized the horrifying, calculated genius of her plan. If I waited, they wouldn't just lose the land. They'd lose everything, including their freedom. She warned me the waiting would be dangerous, emotionally and physically, as they would ramp up the intimidation, but I agreed. "Evidence," she said, shaking my hand with a grip of steel. "Every scrap you've got. Welcome to the war, Jules." I spent months documenting the machine churning. The betrayal of the smear campaign was the hardest part, the one that broke my heart. It grew so toxic. Fake social media accounts, edited photos, rumors of me watching children sled at the local park, that my ex-wife eventually texted, "Stay away from Megan until this is sorted." I mean it. The betrayal cut deep, isolating me not just from the land, but from my own family. I felt like a ghost haunting his own property, utterly alone. But I kept filming, knowing every single shingle, every fence, every flower they planted was digging their hole deeper, waiting for the moment they completed the crime. Then, the night the last house closed, my phone buzzed. An anonymous email. "You need this." It contained internal zoning summaries, revenue spreadsheets, and a damning audio file. The spreadsheets exposed everything, including a $130,000 community engagement bonus paid directly to Celeste to suppress external complaints. My jaw tightened at the casual criminality. The audio file began with Sterling's smooth, corporate voice, and then the chilling confession. "Relax, Celeste. He's nobody. We all know the deed is real, but the beauty is perception beats truth. Keep the pressure on." They knew. The entire operation was a calculated, deliberate act of criminal arrogance. But it didn't exhaust me. It gave me the pure, sharp focus of purpose. I called Amelia, forwarded the files, and her voice went instantly lethal. "Jules, this is racketeering. Federal prison for all of them." "Good," I said, breathing deeply for the first time in months. "Tomorrow morning, we begin." The next morning, the crumble began. I drove to Havenwood Heights and saw a City of Crescent Falls truck posting a stop work order on the polished monument. All operations halted pending full title investigation. It was Amelia's work, fast and precise. Celeste Sterling stormed out of the HOA office, screaming about permits, her composure shattered. The inspector just directed her to the city attorney. She spotted me, eyes wide with raw, desperate hate. You did this, you pathetic, bitter, As she raged, I drove slowly past, muttering. All I needed was time. The final, cinematic confrontation came minutes later when Sterling himself showed up. He walked out of his HOA kingdom onto the dusty public road to face me. He was no longer the perfect king. His expensive suit was rumpled, his hair a mess, the exhaustion and fear visible in every line of his body. "Mr. Vance," he pleaded, offering an immediate settlement, begging me to stop the city inquiries and red tags. I leaned out the window. "You walked out of your kingdom, Mr. Sterling. You built those homes on land that wasn't yours." Celeste shrieked. "You're nothing. We'll crush you." Ignoring her, I focused solely on Sterling. Funny, that's not what the city inspector said yesterday. The panic hit him, deep and visible. He was realizing the avalanche was real. "We'll see you in court," he managed, turning away and shuffling back. In that moment, he was just a small, broken man who finally realized the ground beneath his feet and his entire future didn't belong to him. The courtroom felt electric, charged with the fear of the innocent homeowners and the incandescent anger of the defrauded investors. Sterling at the defense table looked utterly broken, a puppet with severed strings. Amelia put me on the stand first, confirming the deed was authentic and that I never conveyed the land. Sterling's attorney tried to imply I was just a greedy opportunist who appeared when the land was valuable. I answered calmly, my voice steady for the first time in years. "No. I came back to scatter my grandfather's ashes." A profound, sympathetic murmur silenced the courtroom. Next was Celeste Sterling, stiff, pale, defensive. Amelia pressed her mercilessly on the smear campaign. Celeste snapped. He was filming everything. What was I supposed to think? Amelia retorted, her voice cutting through the tension like a razor. That the land belonged to him, Mrs. Sterling. Then came the final, devastating blow. Amelia played the authenticated audio recording. Sterling's voice, arrogant and dismissive, filled the silent room. Who cares about the deed? By the time he figures it out, we'll be on a yacht in Cayman. Judge Hendricks, his face stern and severe, removed his glasses, furious. I rarely see this level of arrogance. You built an entire community on land you never owned, falsified filings, and slandered the rightful owner. He asked for my final word. I stood, looking straight at Sterling, holding his gaze. Your Honor, he says he built a community. No, you built a crime scene. I just own the land it's sitting on. The judge brought down the gavel with a deafening finality. This court finds in favor of the plaintiff, Mr. Julian Vance. Bang. Sterling Development is ordered to cease all operations immediately, provide full restitution, vacate all illegal holdings, and submit all records to the district attorney's office. This matter is now referred for criminal investigation. I closed my eyes, not in triumph, but in profound, absolute release. The weight of years finally lifted. Winning the land back was justice, swift and total, but redemption was next. That evening, watching the comforting, warm lights of Havenwood Heights, I knew the difficult truth. Evicting 512 families, families who were victims too, would only leave me with a scarred hill and bitter memories. The next morning, I told Amelia my plan. I'm not evicting anyone. The land is going into a permanent land trust, legally structured to protect the ecosystem and the people who live there. The land is protected forever, and the people stay. No HOA. Ever again. The fees will be replaced by community-run governance. Amelia was silent for a long moment, studying my face, then smiled faintly. You know, Jules, you might actually be a better man than you look. The Vance Oakhaven Land Trust finalized 2 weeks later, ensuring the families kept their homes, free of predatory HOA fees, and the land's wild soul was protected from any future Sterling. I hiked the ridge, found the old Airstream spot, scattered the last of my dad's ashes, and whispered into the wind. Rest easy. It's safe now. I finally felt peace. The land was free. The families were safe. Justice was done. But here's the final question, the one Amelia and I argued about for weeks. The moral calculus of it all. Should I have taken the treble damages, the $60 million, to fund the trust and ensure the financial future of the entire community, even if it meant years of legal battles? That could have risked the family's immediate financial security? Or was walking away from the money, choosing instead to save the community from the HOA forever in the fastest way possible, the ultimate, morally pure victory? Let me know your honest take below, and don't forget to like and share this story.